Bernie Sanders, he obviously is a proponent of Medicare-For-All. He has been championing that cause for years now, as everybody knows. So he naturally has to fight off a lot of the people that attack it and criticize it and say untrue things about it. So that seems to be the case regarding Joe Biden, because recently Joe Biden has been going after Medicare for All, making up lies that are not true. So I'm going to go through a couple of articles for you guys here that details exactly what's going on regarding the misinformation out there about Medicare for All. So the first article we got here is from Common Dreams. It's from a writer that I've read his articles multiple times here on this podcast. His name's Jake Johnson. And he, so the title of his article here is Sanders accuses Biden of parroting pharma and insurance industry script with attacks on Medicare for All. And I guess this is quoting Bernie Sanders here in the subtext, in the subheadline. It says, at a time when Donald Trump and the health insurance industry are lying every day about Medicare for All, I would hope that my fellow Democrats would not resort to misinformation about my legislation. So let's get to the body of the article now. It says, Senator Bernie Sanders on Sunday accused 2020 Democratic presidential rival Joe Biden of parroting insurance and pharmaceutical industry talking points after the former vice president raised alarm about the supposedly high price tag of Medicare for All and suggested the transition to a single-payer system would leave people with gaps in health care coverage. Campaigning in New Hampshire on Saturday, Biden said he wants to expand the Affordable Care Act and add a public option, claiming such incremental steps wouldn't cost $3 trillion and it can be done quickly. I don't know why we'd get rid of what in fact is working and move to something totally new, Biden said. And so there are differences. Medicare for All advocates, including Sanders, the lead sponsor of the Medicare for All Act of 2019 in the Senate, argue that the ACA is not working, pointing to the tens of millions of Americans who are uninsured or underinsured. And then here, Bernie calls out Biden for his absurd attacks. It says, in an interview with the New York Times on Sunday, Sanders called Biden's attacks on Medicare for All totally absurd. Obviously, what Biden was doing is what the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical industries, Republicans, do, ignoring the fact that people will save money on their health care because they will no longer have to pay premiums or out-of-pocket expenses, said the Vermont senator. They will no longer have high deductibles and high co-payments. The charge that he's making, Sanders added, is exactly what the Republicans are saying. And then here's some more stupidity from Biden. Biden's remarks in New Hampshire capped off several days of attacks on Medicare for All by the former vice president, even as polling released last week showed that 2/3 of Democratic voters support moving to a single-payer system that abolishes private insurance. In a CNN interview published online today, Biden, who came under fire in April for attending a fundraiser hosted by a health insurance CEO just hours after launching his 2020 presidential bid, said it would be a sin to attempt to replace the ACA with Medicare for All. Following that remark, Medicare for All advocates pounced on Biden's characterization of the proposal. On Friday, Biden told the crowd in New Hampshire that while Medicare for All proponents mean well, he doesn't want to start over. Quoting him here, it says, "How many of you out there have had someone you've lost to cancer, or cancer yourself? No time, man," said Biden. "We cannot have a hiatus of 6 months, a year, 2, 3 to get something done." Sanders responded to Biden's comments in a statement on Saturday and announced that he will confront the Democratic opponents of Medicare-For-All in greater detail in a speech in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday. At a time when Donald Trump and the health insurance industry are lying every day about Medicare-For-All, Sanders said, "I would hope that my fellow Democrats would not resort to misinformation about my legislation." That's the same thing that was the same quote from Bernie that was in the subheadline too. So the senator continues here. Here are the facts. Under Medicare-For-All, over a 4-year period, we will transition to a system in which Medicare is expanded to cover every man, woman, and child in the country. It is preposterous to argue that as we expand Medicare for all, that people with cancer and other illnesses will not get the care that they need. In fact, under Medicare for all, the good news is that we will end the horror of millions of people going into bankruptcy and financial distress simply because they need hospital care for serious conditions. We have a healthcare crisis in this country. Everyday Americans die because they cannot afford the healthcare they desperately need, while the CEOs of insurance and drug companies get rich off of their suffering. We cannot continue to tinker around the edges while 80 million Americans lack health insurance or are underinsured with high premiums, copays, and deductibles. So yeah, that's a great breakdown of what Bernie said there, and that last quote there was excellent. Typical Bernie Sanders, just getting to the meat of the details, laying it out very simply for everybody to understand, and basically debunking all the bullshit that's coming from the likes of Joe Biden, who's basically just a prostitute for the health insurance industry and big donors, the CEOs and stuff that run the different, health insurance companies and, pharmaceutical companies and all that stuff, let alone all the, big banks and other fucking, rich ass donors that give money to candidates like Biden. He's not the only one. So that was, that's Bernie laid it out very well there, and that's something that we'll obviously always expect from him, and he always delivers. But I wanted to read you guys another piece here. This one is from Huffington Post, and this one actually gets much more into detail, or at least the author gets much more into detail about how what Joe Biden is doing is he is scaremongering, or doing a meta-scare. So he's scaring people about Medicare for all, essentially. Not just Medicare for all, but Medicare. And he's scaring older voters, into thinking that if Medicare for all is implemented, all the people that are on Medicare, which are the old people, they're going to lose their Medicare. Which is bullshit, because the whole idea for Medicare for all is to insure all Americans, not just this American or that American. And just because you're insuring them all doesn't mean you're going to take away healthcare from anybody. So that's bullshit. But anyway, so let's get into the detail of the article here. Before I do, I obviously want to read the headline here. It says, Biden mimics GOP fear-mongering in his attacks on Medicare for all. And the subheadline says, all the Medicare you have is gone, the former vice president told an AARP audience of what would happen under a Medicare for all plan. And like I said, this article is from Huffington Post. The author is Jeffrey Young. And let's see what Jeffrey Young he writes here. So it says, if some of former Vice President Joe Biden's talking points against Medicare for all sound familiar, they should. He borrowed them from Republicans. It's not just that Biden's healthcare platform is less progressive than those of his rivals, especially Bernie Sanders, nor is it simply that Biden holds centrist views about the value of competition and choice in the insurance market. It's worse. At a forum sponsored by the AARP and the Des Moines Register in Iowa, Biden trotted out scare tactics about healthcare reform that would make President Donald Trump proud. That's a good analogy there. Or characterization. And And then here's some more scaremongering from Biden, as the author notes. It says, first, Biden promoted his plan, which also would significantly increase the government's role in health coverage by creating a public option to compete with private insurers, and would provide much more generous financial assistance to people covered by policies from the Affordable Care Act's health insurance exchanges. Unlike Sanders' Medicare-For-All plan, however, Biden's would leave the private health insurance market intact. Then Biden began to make the case against Medicare-For-All. It rested largely on trying to scare old people, a tactic Republicans frequently use to whip up anxiety about any Democratic plan to reform the healthcare system. Quoting, is this Biden here? Yeah, it's quoting Biden here. It says, Medicare goes away as you know it. All the Medicare you have is gone, Biden said as he leaned down toward moderator Kathy Abrodovich from the Des Moines Register for effect. The transition of dropping 300 million people on a new plan, totally new, is, I think, kind of a little risky at this point. But then you would never want to do that. It's not like all of a sudden like you would like get around to just wanting to do that. So claiming it's risky at this point is just... it's obviously a stall tactic, so you can pretend you're in favor of giving people health care when you're just trying to keep people on insurance, essentially. And continuing on here, it says, as a point of fact, the Medicare program envisioned under Medicare-For-All is not the program as it exists today. Unlike what Biden insinuated, however, it would have more generous benefits and little to no out-of-pocket spending. Senior citizens, like everyone else, would be enrolled in a single-payer national health care program. This attack utilizes classic Republican Medicare tactics designed to foment discontent among older Americans that anyone else's gains come at their expense. Trump himself published an op-ed last October in USA Today under the headline, Donald Trump, Democrats, Medicare-For-All will demolish promises to seniors. In the op-ed, Trump makes a number of false and exaggerated claims about Medicare-For-All, but it's this line that's most in sync with Biden's rhetoric. Quoting Trump from the op-ed, it says, the Democratic Party's so-called Medicare-For-All would really be Medicare for none. Medicare for none has become a favored talking point in recent months for Republicans like Trump and Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, Republican of Kentucky. Biden should recognize this fear-mongering strategy because McConnell and others used it extensively when President Barack Obama was working to enact the Affordable Care Act in 2009 and 2010, and continued to use it to criticize the law. For a candidate so fixated on protecting Obamacare and an ex-vice president who claims partial credit for Obama's legislative success on healthcare reform, it's jarring to hear him parrot those attacks now. Yeah, so true. And the last part here goes into how Biden has basically been doing this for a while now. It says, perhaps worse still was Biden's suggestion that sick people could be hurt during the 4-year transition from the current health coverage system to a new Medicare-For-All program. Biden asked members of the audience to raise their hands if they'd ever lost a loved one to a terminal illness. Every second counts. It's not about a year. It's about the day, the week, the month, the next 6 months, he said. The truth of the matter is it's likely to be a bumpy ride getting to where we're going. Biden has been using variations of this line at public events and during press interviews in recent weeks. And the subtext is pretty obvious. Be afraid of Medicare for all because you might die from it. It's an aspersion straight out of 2008 vice presidential nominee 2008 Republican vice presidential nominee Sarah Palin's heinous death panel's playbook. So that's so ironic, isn't it? As this author details in this great article I just read for you guys. It's so ironic that Biden is ironically using the same attacks that was used against Obama when he was pushing Obamacare, which was obviously not a socialist takeover plan. It was nothing like Medicare for all at all. At best, it was a public option, and they were using these tactics against that weak ass legislation and saying that Medicare is going to be gone forever and people are going to lose their insurance, and if people remember from the Tea Party protests, the Tea Party protesters were holding up signs that says, take your government hands off our Medicare, when in reality Medicare is government run. So how would you take your government hands off people's Medicare? And that was used in the context of like, oh, well, the government is going to take away. So in other words, take the hands off our Medicare meant don't take away our Medicare. But the government runs Medicare. So Medicare is it's a government program. So that never made any sense. But yeah, it's crazy how opportunistic and sleazy Joe Biden is. He just can't help himself. He's so desperate, to push for policies that, are going to benefit his donors and the rich people that obviously give him money and, that are going to be pissed about what's going to happen under a, Bernie Sanders type system. And this is what he resorts to. And yeah, it's really, really sad. I mean, I wouldn't think he would stoop that low. And I think even something like this, I think even Obama would respond to something like this and be like, listen, Joe, this is not a good idea. You're not going down the right path here by trying to frame Medicare-For-All as if it's going to be taking away Medicare from the people that already have it. So, and then to think that Trump and Biden are sounding so similar. I mean, like the author said, this is something that Trump would be proud to hear. This is just like what you would hear from Donald Trump. And I mean, obviously Biden doesn't have any shame. He just wants to get, this is something Kyle Klinsky of Secular Talk has mentioned, but it just seems like Joe Biden wants to get elected for the sole purpose of having that label of I'm president and I was vice president before and now I'm president. So it's all a career path for these politicians to basically like brag about being at a certain level, right? So to show like, oh, look what I've done. I've created this wonderful legacy for myself where I'm president, but even though I'm doing it through the guise of essentially lying and making shit up, which obviously every politician does. But in this case, when you're taking the playbook of the Republican Party, it's even more shameful. And I didn't think Biden would go that low because I didn't think he was that desperate. But, as we've seen, and I think I pointed it out before, Kyle's, pointed it out, the more Joe Biden talks, the more he gives speeches, the more he's in public, the more he embarrasses himself. I mean, look how bad he did in the debate. He got absolutely, smacked over the head, bitch slapped by the likes of Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and everything, so it made him look like a complete fool. And obviously that's what he continues to do. And now he's just so desperate to maintain that tiny lead, which is getting, shrinking, that tiny lead he has in the polls. And eventually people are going to want to, they're going to want to migrate towards a different candidate. And it's not going to be him because he just keeps putting his foot in his mouth. So this is actually good for somebody like Bernie Sanders, obviously somebody like Kamala Harris, Elizabeth Warren, whoever. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know if it's going to last long to the level, to the level of, truly like getting people to like, so at least getting like for example, like the Obama loyalists and obviously the people that are like, the donors and stuff. I mean, he's losing a lot of donors as far as like the kind of people that are like giving him money, obviously, and they're like kind of fleeing away from him because they're seeing how bad he did in the debate and stuff, and how his poll numbers aren't looking good. So, those donors are starting to hedge their bets. They're trying to be like, I don't know if I want to put all my money into this guy because I could end up losing money essentially because I'm gonna invest into a candidate that is basically a moron and he's gonna keep fucking up his chances. So, yeah, I mean, and you guys have to remember, this is something that progressives, again, Kyle Klinsky has mentioned this too, but we've pointed out, others have pointed out how the actual death panels are the for-profit health insurance companies, are the companies that throw people off their their healthcare plans, not Medicare, but their healthcare plans. So anybody that's under some whatever it is health insurance company, throw it out there. Pfizer, Aetna, I don't know what else. What other health insurance companies are out there? But all those different kinds. There's all these different companies out there that just, they're the death panels because they throw you off your insurance once they see that they don't want to cover your, health insurance. They don't want to give you health insurance. So they're like, oh, okay, fuck you. So we're just going to throw you off so we don't have to endure your payments for your horrible cancer treatment and, I'm sorry, the horrible cancer that you're, suffering through. So we're just going to be like, we're just going to kick you off so we don't have to deal with that. We don't have to take the brunt of that anymore. So that's how they see it. And it's fucked up, man. I don't know how those people, I don't know how they sleep at night knowing that they're fucking over regular people who just want to live longer, And that's why that's why the life expectancy in this country is, compared to a lot of other countries which have better health, they have better health outcomes because they're actually taken care of. Their health is taken care of. The life expectancy in this country is horrible, and everybody else is living a hell of a lot better than we are. While we're can't even get decent treatment for something that's a terminal disease. And my own father is going through something like that right now because he has a terminal disease it's a neurological disorder or neurological disease, not disorder, but neurological disease that's, it could end up unfortunately killing him. And because of the, we're living in this country where there's no decent treatment, can't even get in something good that's good enough or, close enough to something like stem cell. Even stem cell can't do the trick. So it's really a shame. And that's why we need somebody like Bernie Sanders in there, and he can, completely change this, system around and revolutionize it and make it better for all of us.